I want you to imagine your typical music listening habits for just a second.
Ooh, this is a dangerous game.
Right. But think about the last time you were on a train or, navigating a crowded sidewalk or just sitting at your desk trying to drown out the open plan office.
Yeah, we've all been there.
How often are your fingers just kind of hovering over that skip button on your screen? I mean, we are completely conditioned to consume music as these quick, tightly packed bursts of information.
Oh, absolutely. We want the catchy chorus. We want the beat drop.
Exactly. We want the emotional payoff, and we want it delivered within the first, 30 seconds. If it doesn't hook you immediately, swipe, you're just on to the next track in the queue.
It is a highly transactional way of experiencing sound, if you think about it.
Yeah.
We're effectively trading our limited attention for this immediate, predictable neurological reward.
Yeah, a quick dopamine hit.
Exactly. And the architecture of most modern music, the way it's written, produced, and packaged for streaming platforms, is specifically engineered to facilitate that exact rapid-fire transaction.
It's music operating purely as data delivery. But today, we are going to explore a completely different approach to sound. We're taking a deep dive into a really fascinating translated column from Monumental Movement Records.
Yeah, MMR, published in December of 2025.
Right. And the focus here is on ambient techno and deep ambient, which is often categorized under this really evocative label of deep sea ambient.
Such a great term.
It really is. And our mission today is to understand how this isn't just, a niche musical subgenre. This is a fundamental, almost architectural redesign of the act of listening itself.
Yeah, and the core thesis driving this deep dive is that deep ambient abandons the entire concept of short-term stimulation.
It just completely throws it out.
Totally. It stops treating music as information that you're supposed to passively decode. Instead, it attempts to transform music into an environment.
An environment, right, not a story.
Exactly. You aren't meant to just listen to a song from the outside. You are meant to physically and psychologically inhabit a space.
Okay.
And doing that requires breaking almost every foundational rule we have about how an audio track is supposed to function.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if you want to build an environment rather than just tell a quick story, the very first thing you need is time.
A lot of time.
Like a ton of time. These deep ambient tracks often run for 10, 20, sometimes 30 minutes or more. And let me push back on that for a second.
Sure, go for it.
When you see a 20-minute track on a playlist, it's incredibly intimidating. Isn't that just a producer refusing to edit themselves?
That's the immediate thought, right?
Yeah, it feels like someone ran out of ideas, left the synthesizers running, and just went to get a coffee or something.
It is a really common assumption, especially given our conditioning for those 3-minute pop tracks we talked about. But in deep ambient, a 20-minute duration is not a lack of development.
Okay, then what is it?
It's a strict, non-negotiable design requirement. Think about how a standard song works. It relies on what we call symbolic development.
Like verse, chorus, bridge, that kind of thing.
Exactly. It tells a linear narrative, and it uses shifting chords and melodies to move you from point A to point B.
Right, there's a clear destination.
But in a 20-minute ambient piece, short-term symbolic development completely loses its meaning. If a single chord progression takes 4 entire minutes to resolve, your brain physically stops tracking it as a narrative moving forward in time.
Oh, wow. So you just stop waiting for the payoff.
Exactly. You stop waiting and you start experiencing it as a continuous state of being.
So all the traditional tools of songwriting, the hooks, the bridges, the dramatic key changes, they're just thrown out the window.
Completely abandoned.
But if you aren't listening for the chorus to drop, what exactly is holding your attention for 20 unbroken minutes?
Well, the focus shifts entirely away from the macro and zooms in on the micro changes.
Okay.
Because there is no overarching narrative distracting you, you start listening to density fluctuations.
Density fluctuations.
Yeah. You start noticing the spatial movement of the sound slowly, almost imperceptibly, panning from your left ear to a spot seemingly hovering right behind your head.
So the microscopic details become the main event.
Exactly, which is a huge shift in how we pay attention.
Which brings up a really fascinating tension regarding how electronic music is actually made. Because electronic music is built on loops, right? Repeating digital sequences.
Yeah, that's the foundation.
But in this specific genre, the text points out that the use of loops isn't actually about repetition at all. The loop is a device used to artificially construct a state where things appear not to be changing, even though they constantly are.
Right, it's the illusion of stasis. It is a very delicate psychological trick to pull off.
It makes me think of watching a campfire.
Ooh, I like that comparison.
Because if you sit and stare at a campfire, your brain registers it as one constant static object. You just think, that is a fire. It's essentially a visual loop.
Right, you're not tracking every single spark.
Exactly. But if you actually pay attention to the details, the flames are never in the exact same mathematical position twice.
Never.
The colors shift from orange to blue, the embers pop unpredictably, the smoke drifts in different patterns. It is constantly moving and evolving, yet it remains entirely stationary.
The campfire is literally the perfect visual representation of this concept. Because if a producer just looped a 4-bar synthesizer sequence perfectly for 20 minutes, your brain would recognize the exact mathematical repetition within about 60 seconds.
You just figure the pattern out and move on.
Exactly. It would get bored, categorize the sound as non-threatening background noise,
Yeah.
and just tune it out completely.
It would become a dead object, like the hum of an air conditioner or a refrigerator.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So to keep the sound alive without turning it into a pop song, producers artificially inject slight, continuous fluctuations into those loops.
So if I'm picturing this in the studio, the producer isn't just pressing play and walking away. Are they physically sitting there for 20 minutes, slowly twisting a single knob to make a sound slightly brighter or slightly more muffled?
What's fascinating here is that it's exactly what they are doing. They are managing the environment in real time.
Wow, so it's a live performance in a way.
It really is. A producer might slowly open and close a frequency filter over the course of 8 minutes. This alters the brightness of a drone.
And a drone is just that continuous, unchanging wall of sound holding the track together, right?
Right, exactly. Or they might slightly alter the length of a reverb tail.
Okay, the reverb tail, that's just the echo that hangs in the air after a sound stops, yeah.
Spot on. If the producer subtly extends that echo by just a fraction of a second over a 10-minute span, the imaginary room you were listening in feels like it is physically expanding and contracting.
Oh, that's wild. It feels like the room is breathing.
Yes. And these tiny organic shifts are the absolute only clues the listener has that time is actually passing.
If the entire magic of this music relies on these microscopic breathing fluctuations, the actual physical environment where these sounds are created has to be incredibly important.
Well, it's everything.
Right, because if I build a track in a highly controlled, purely digital studio environment where every single drum hit is snapped perfectly to a digital grid so there is zero human error, what we call quantization, I'd imagine that creates a very stiff, rigid environment.
It creates a surgical type of time. Mathematical perfection lags breath.
It's too clean.
Exactly. And this is why the integration of live improvisation is so crucial to this genre. When a producer performs these subtle knob turns and slider movements live by hand, they physically cannot be mathematically perfect.
There's always going to be a little bit of a human tremor.
Right. That slight instability is vital because it turns the music into an ongoing, unfolding phenomenon.
Rather than a static finished object stamped out in a digital factory.
Exactly. It makes the track feel deeply present.
So if this environment is so delicate, so reliant on careful, human-guided micro movements, I'd imagine the ultimate tool for a producer would be pure silence.
You would think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah, like giving the listener a moment of total emptiness to reset, but actually dropping the volume to zero is the absolute worst thing you can do here according to the text.
It seems so counterintuitive. I mean, you would think a genre called Deep Ambient would just embrace the mute button.
Right.
But true silence, like a total drop to 0 decibels, is actually a violent threat to the acoustic environment the producer has built.
Because silence isn't actually silent. If the track stops, the real world immediately takes over.
Exactly. The silence acts as a pause that snaps your attention outward. If the track drops to 0, the ambient and noise of your actual physical room rushes in to fill the void.
Oh, I see. You suddenly hear your refrigerator hum, you hear the chaotic traffic outside.
Or you hear your own breathing. Or the footsteps of your upstairs neighbor. Your consciousness is immediately pulled out of the artificial acoustic space you were inhabiting and dragged harshly back into physical reality.
The spell is just completely broken.
Exactly.
So how do they handle quiet moments then?
To prevent that interruption, producers utilize microsounds. They sustain extremely low-level frequencies or room tones continuously underneath the track.
So what feels to the listener like a moment of profound silence, like a deep breath in the music, is actually an acoustically fulfilled space.
Yes, it is carefully managed, quiet,
Yeah.
rather than an empty vacuum.
Yeah.
It holds your attention safely inside the bubble.
It's almost like acoustic virtual reality.
It operates very similarly, yeah. The human brain is highly susceptible to spatial audio cues.
How so?
Well, if the reverb on a completely synthetic artificial synthesizer patch tells your brain that the sound just bounced off a concrete wall 50 feet away, your brain will subconsciously believe you are standing inside a massive concrete structure.
Even though there's no real room at all.
Exactly. You do not need a traditional field recording of a real forest or a real cathedral to make the brain feel transported.
So if the producer designs the acoustic shielding perfectly, your imagination accepts this 100% fake digital environment as a real physical
Oh,
space.
really? Your brain fills in the gaps.
But wait, a headphone bubble is totally isolated? If I take off my headphones and push this exact same track through giant living room speakers, that internal density is gone.
Completely gone, yeah.
The sound is now competing with my physical walls, my furniture, the literal air in my house. The architecture of the imaginary sonic room has to completely change based on how I'm playing it.
This is a huge point in the text. The playback medium is essentially half of the instrument in deep ambient.
Okay, break that down for us.
Let's look at the physics of headphones first.
Sure.
When you listen on headphones, the physical pressure of the low-end frequencies, that deep bass you actually feel vibrating in your chest at a concert, drops significantly.
Right, because there's no air in a physical room for the sound waves to push around.
Exactly. However, because the sound is injected directly into your ears, bypassing your room entirely, the density of the internal space massively increases.
It becomes a highly intimate, almost cerebral experience.
Yeah. The soundstage is constructed entirely between your ears.
Okay, and when we flip it to a large, high-fidelity speaker system...
The physical room you are sitting in actually becomes a co-resonator with the track.
Right.
The low frequencies interact with the drywall, the floorboards, the acoustic properties of your couch.
Wow, so the music isn't just happening in the room.
No, the music and the room merge into a single acoustic entity. You feel the duration of the track with your entire nervous system, not just your ears.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because this brings us to the psychological space this music targets. And that is arguably even more complex than the physical space.
Oh, without a doubt.
Because this genre isn't meant for active, focused listening at a desk. And it isn't meant to put you into a deep REM sleep either. It is aiming for a very specific state of human consciousness. The intermediate state.
The twilight zone.
Exactly, that twilight zone right between wakefulness and sleep.
Right, you are drifting, you're not fully alert, but you haven't surrendered your consciousness entirely. In this state, the music sits comfortably in the background. And this dictates a critical, almost paradoxical rule for the genre.
Which is?
The music must actively avoid inducing strong emotions.
Which feels entirely backward. I mean, we are so deeply trained to think the entire purpose of art and music is to make us feel something intense.
Yeah, joy, profound sadness, hype, nostalgia.
Right. But here, emotion is viewed as a liability.
It is extremely dangerous to the intermediate state. Think about what a sudden swell of triumphant cinematic chords does to your brain.
It jolts you awake.
Exactly. It forces your consciousness to snap to the foreground. You become highly aware of the song and highly aware of your own emotional reaction to it.
It demands your active, critical attention.
Right. So by keeping the emotional palette neutral and detached, deep ambient allowed your consciousness to remain soft and diffused. It doesn't ask you to process grief or joy. It just asks you to exist.
It's like the music is politely refusing to intrude on your thoughts.
That's a great way to put it.
And this connects deeply to the culture of night listening mentioned in the column. It makes perfect sense that this music thrives after the sun goes down.
Oh, yeah. The text is very specific about this.
Right, because when it's dark, your visual information vanishes.
Yeah.
You aren't distracted by seeing your messy desk or the cars outside, so your brain naturally amplifies your acoustic spatial awareness to compensate.
Furthermore, producers intentionally mix these tracks to match the physiological state of a human body winding down at night.
Wait, they actually mix the tracks differently for nighttime.
Yeah. In works explicitly designed for night playback, the high frequencies, the sharp piercing sounds like a hi-hat or a bright synth lead, are purposefully suppressed or removed entirely.
But why are high frequencies so uniquely disruptive to that nighttime twilight state?
It comes down to evolutionary biology.
Really? Biology?
Yeah, I mean, the human auditory system is hardwired for survival. High-pitched, sharp, transient noises mimic the sounds of danger in the wild.
Like a snapping twig or a distress call or a predator moving quickly.
Exactly. When your brain hears a sharp, high frequency, it triggers a subtle fight-or-flight response. It wakes you up because it thinks you need to pay attention to a potential threat.
That makes total sense. And so low frequencies do the opposite.
Yes, low, sustained, rumbling frequencies mimic safe, enclosed environments. Think of the protective acoustics of a deep cave, or even the muffled, low-frequency heartbeat heard from inside the womb.
Wow, so long, sustained mid-low frequencies biologically signal safety.
Exactly. They lower your heart rate and match the relaxed state of your nervous system preparing for rest.
So we have this incredibly deliberate musical ecosystem. It requires immense patience, 20-minute durations, an emotionless twilight state of mind, and deep, unforced attention to microscopic fluctuations.
It's a lot to ask of a listener.
Right. So how does something this demanding, this glacially slow survive, let alone thrive, in our current hyper-fast TikTok-era digital culture? We opened by talking about the skip button. This music is the absolute antithesis of the skip button.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Deep Ambient operates not just as a genre of music, but as a quiet act of resistance.
Resistance against what? The algorithms.
Yeah, in an era dominated by algorithmic streaming platforms, the interface itself encourages instant gratification and immediate judgment. You decide the worth of a piece of art in 10 seconds.
True.
Deep Ambient inherently resists this entire paradigm. You literally cannot judge the architectural value of a 20-minute micro-fluctuating drone in 10 seconds.
Because the music refuses to play the algorithms game?
Precisely. Because it takes so long to unfold, the sheer act of deciding to let it play, of putting down your phone, stepping away from the endless feed and choosing not to skip, becomes a meaningful statement.
It is the deliberate rebellion against the immediate?
Exactly.
There's a brilliant framing of this in the translated column. It describes Deep Ambient as extremely democratic music.
I love that phrase.
Me too. Because usually, when we engage with a song, it acts almost like a dictator. A pop song aggressively tells you when to dance. A sad ballad dictates when you should feel melancholic. It forces its intensity and pacing onto you.
Right, it demands a specific reaction.
But this genre is democratic because the listener is never forced to be a passive receiver. It is entirely up to you to decide how much attention to give it. You can lean in and scrutinize the minute changes in a reverb tail with your eyes closed, or you can just let it fade completely into the background while you read a book.
It offers you total autonomy over your own attention.
And we don't get a lot of autonomy these days.
Well, we don't.
Yeah.
It is a fascinating evolution of listener autonomy, and the timeline of how we got here shows a clear progression in the column.
Take us through that timeline a bit.
Sure. So, in the 1990s, long ambient works started becoming generalized in the electronic music scene, laying the foundation for these sprawling track lengths.
Setting the stage, basically.
Right. Then, moving into the 2000s, we saw a massive diversification in personal listening environments. The rise of the iPod and MP3 players meant you could take these private sonic environments anywhere.
You could carry your deep-sea bubble onto a crowded subway or a noisy airplane, completely isolating yourself from the public sphere.
Exactly. Yeah. And then by the 2010s, this music became deeply integrated into people's daily routines. This was the era of the functional playlist.
Oh yeah, the beats to study to or whatever.
Right. It became the soundtrack for deep work, for coding, for studying, for trying to fall asleep.
Which brings us to the current era.
Yes, the 2020s and beyond. We are seeing a profound reevaluation of this genre. It is no longer just viewed as a functional tool to help you focus on a spreadsheet. It is being recognized as true environmental music.
It is a sophisticated, intentional redesign of the spaces we inhabit and the way we process the passage of time. So what does this all mean? We started out by looking at what seemed like a niche electronic music subgenre, characterized by, overly long tracks. But we've uncovered a profound architectural feat.
It really is structural.
Deep Ambient is building entirely artificial spaces out of sustained low frequencies, biological cues, and painstakingly handcrafted microfluctuations. It is creating a meticulously designed acoustic bubble that respects your autonomy, asks for absolutely nothing in return, and actively resists the frantic, skip-heavy demands of the modern digital world.
Well, and it leaves us with a rather profound question to consider regarding our relationship with the spaces we inhabit.
What's that?
The source material reveals the staggering amount of effort producers put into using artificial reflections, evolutionary biology, and carefully managed microsounds to build these safe, non-emotional sonic environments.
Right, they're engineering safety.
Exactly. They are effectively building acoustic shields to protect our attention from the immediate demanding outside world. But If we require these invisible 20-minute acoustic shields just to find a baseline level of equilibrium, what does our increasing reliance on this music reveal about the overwhelming, invasive nature of the physical and algorithmic environments we are forced to navigate every single day?
Wow. Are we constantly building these immaculate sonic rooms just because our real rooms have become too incredibly loud?
Exactly.
That is a heavy, beautiful thought to leave you with. Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us today. Next time you put your headphones on to drown out the commute or the office, before you rush to hit play on that catchy 3-minute pop song, maybe give yourself 20 minutes. Turn off the screen, lean back, and try listening not to the notes being played, but to the delicate breathing spaces between the sounds.